All right, this video is going to be a quick, straight to the point video that essentially takes you over how I've been able to structure my calendar and the two different methods I've used and how it's been able to allow me to work 10 to 14 hours a day pretty much every day and it feel almost effortless. And just for some proof, as you can see, right, like I've been on this grind for quite some time, right? Like I've had pretty consistently decked out weeks, and I tend to be very meticulous and make sure I have a lot of my days filled out. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of gaps in here, and I try to make sure it's very decked out. Now, the current structure you see here is the one I used to use, and this is the one I definitely recommend to any beginners or anyone just getting started with any type of business model or just working hard in general. I would recommend starting with this, and then there's another method that I currently use now, which I'll take you over after, which is what I recommend if you're, for lack of a better word, a little more advanced, because this one will help you develop the skills you need to get started. Without further ado, let's actually get into making this calendar. So I've got up a fresh calendar here, all right? And I'm going to take you over essentially what I recommend doing. So this structure is going to be a very, very simple structure, right? And I recommend doing it each day just before you go to bed or just after you finish the bulk of your work or just after dinner. Whatever time where you've essentially finished the bulk of your work for the day, I recommend then planning your calendar and make sure it's the day before, not the day of, because if it's the day of, you're probably more inclined to make it a little bit easier on yourself. If you do it the night before, I tend to find that you definitely plan it out better. So the whole simple concept is, right, is that you plan in as much detail as possible. And this is very important when you're just starting out, because this is going to allow you to sit back and reflect at the end of the week. And some people talk about just having like big blocks of work. And yes, that's good. But I think when you're beginning and especially learning how to work hard, having a very detailed calendar so that you know exactly what you're doing at every minute of the day is very important. It's what I recommend to anyone just getting started. Planning every part of your day in. This includes sleep, shitting, fucking having lunch, having dinner, going to sleep, your morning routine, whatever you do, plan in as much detail as possible so you're always aware of what's going on. So I'm going to plan out a simple calendar for what it would look like for a day of organic dropshipping, because that's what I know best. And I'll plan out exactly what I think a day like that would be, and I'll include stuff like going to the gym and dinner in there, and so you can kind of get an idea. So the first thing we'll start off with is we'll just go based off what I used to do. And so I used to wake up at 5, I still kind of do. So what I like to do is you start off and you put in your sleep, right? Now you can color code these. I really do like to color code mine, but for the sake of this, I'm just gonna have it plain out like this, right? So the first thing you plan in is sleep, right? And a little trick, if you want to duplicate it over to the next day, because you're gonna wake up at the same time every day, which I highly recommend, you can literally click it to drag it like this and click Control, and it will just duplicate the event. And so you can literally just duplicate it. That's just a little trick. So yeah, I plan out sleep, right? And this is all what I'm doing the day before, right? So the day before, you're planning out your calendar, right? So usually for me, I'd have a coffee and stretch for the first 15 minutes of the day, right? And then I go into the next bit, which is usually posting videos, right? So this is usually how I would see the start of the day. But as you can see, like I'm even incorporating the 15 minutes it takes me to have a coffee and stretch every single morning. And so the next stage, if you're doing organic dropshipping, you got to film, you got to plan, you got to do all that. So this next stage, right, if I hadn't already planned the videos, say I've got a product that's going to take me a bit, I would literally plan videos, right? Make sure I put in planned videos, and usually I'd even follow it by like product 1 or planned videos for whatever product it is, so I know what product. And then I'd set up, right? This is how I'd go, set up, and then I'd film. Let's say it takes me this long to film the product, right? And so you've gone from 5 to now, and this is usually in here. I would then have lunch around here, right? And I'd only have lunch for about half hour, right? And say, and then after lunch, you know, you get into editing, and say that takes you another short while, right? You've got editing and you've finished all this, you've had lunch, you've filmed it, and you've edited all your videos. And now after this, say you go for a quick 2-hour gym session, and that includes travel to the gym. Like I'm talking like, that includes the travel to the gym. Everything should be incorporated in here. And so this gym session would include the travel to and from the gym. And then I'd normally have a shower straight after the gym and then have dinner. Now your day might be structured a little bit differently depending how you like to structure your day. But this is generally what I found worked. And at the end of the day, I'd probably top it off with literally some product research, and then I'd have an hour to decompress and go to bed. As I said, you can literally duplicate events, and then I would just shrink that. And then bam. So now we have a full day. And so you see, you go to sleep, I wake up, have a coffee, I post my videos. Now I start planning that bulk lot of videos for the week, right? For one of my products. I set up for that product. I then film that product. I then have a break and have lunch. And then I go into editing that product. And then for me, gym was almost like a break because I wasn't thinking that hard and I was just lifting weights. And so that was usually a good time. So here I was getting a little bit burnt out, but having the gym in there does help. And I get back, I made sure to put in, have a shower, have dinner, and then I do product research, go to sleep, and then actually asleep. And so that, for example, is just one day. Now, if you've got a little bit more on, say you've got to go to a certain events, or you've got all sorts of different things, this is still a bit blocked out. If you're starting out, I would go even more specific, right? You go way more in depth with exactly what's happening, right? If you had a small little, say you had a meeting here, right? And you had a few other different things in here, and you'd look and it'd be more and more small little blocks, right? And that's very important. Now, this is how you would use the calendar when you wake up. So I tend to, first thing I do when I wake up is I turn my PC on and then I boot up my calendar. And that's the first thing I almost always instinctively do is boot up my calendar, right? And one thing I did forget to incorporate in here is actually planning your calendar. So I forgot to incorporate planning your calendar. You make sure that you have that put in. I usually dedicate 15 minutes. Sometimes it doesn't quite take that long, but planning the calendar, once you get the hang of it, does not take that long, and I might do it while I'm having dinner. But this is how you actually use your calendar once you get started, right? So I start my day and I have my calendar open on another tab on my computer or on another monitor, and I have it open permanently, right? And it's pretty much always open from the start, when my computer starts up to when my computer turns off, right? Which is about when I wake up and go to sleep, right? And so when you start it up, you might start playing videos, but say, you've got the hang of this product and, playing videos only took you half hour less, right? And so you adjust your calendar as you go, right? But then say the filming took a little bit longer, took an extra 15 minutes, you make sure you document that. And now there's a 15-minute gap in here. If you just slacked off, I would leave that empty, right? If you're like, doom scrolling, you don't catch yourself, you could put doom scrolling in there or leave it empty. I tend to, if it's just wasted time or like you just fluff-assing about, I leave it empty. But you can be specific and put in a certain thing. But I like to see gaps in my calendar because that's how I know I wasn't doing something productive or necessary, right? So I like leaving gaps. And as you can see in this calendar, right, so some of these parts here, like I must have been just mindlessly scrolling or doing something in these gaps. And this is how you can kind of reflect. And so you can see different weeks. Like here, for example, I had an hour of unproductive time. And here I've had like an hour 45 during the day of unproductive time. And so that's kind of how I use the calendar, and you adjust it as necessary. So say you had a little gap here, you just did nothing, then you had lunch. And now you plan this out and you'll fill this out every single day. And then this is the part that I recommend so that you can always reflect back. And this is the important part why I recommend it to beginners. So as you can see here, I've had gaps all through this calendar, not big gaps, not many of them, but I still have plenty of gaps here. And this means I'm able to reflect, right? Why I have all these different gaps, and I can reflect that, days like this, right, way more packed out, whereas days like this, right, where I have some gaps in it here and there, I can kind of reflect back on it at the end of the week and go, all right, this is where my issues were, and this is how I can improve. And so as you get better, you'll tend to fill out your calendar more or have more concise things. Like here, look here, I had another hour odd here that I just wasted, right? And so you can reflect back on how actually productive you were and how much work you actually got done. And I tend to like to color code it so you can easily see the blocks of what you're doing. And if you don't know how to color code, that's dead easy. Literally when you're making it, bam, you can change it to whatever color you want, right? And so that's pretty much the simplistic state of what I recommend for a beginner coming out. And as I said, why I recommended it. And what I found that as you use it a little bit more, you tend to get used to it, and like it just dictates my day, right? Like this just dictated what I did. As I got used to it and become habitual, it literally just dictated what my day was, and that's why it felt effortless, because I just stick to what's on my calendar because there was nothing else to do. That's just what I did, is I stuck to my calendar. And if something happens and right, say the gym session barely took any time or I had to leave early, I make sure I document that. And so you pretty much have a documentation of exactly what your day was like. and then you can actually know how productive you were. But now let's go over the second structure, which is the one that I'd say is a little bit more advanced than what I use. It's way simpler, and that's what's more advanced about it. It's because you actually have an understanding of what you need to do, how you work, and that you know you can just sit down and work, and you don't need a super detailed structure of what you're doing. You just know you'll get to work and you'll work till it's done. And so this next structure we'll go over to in a fresh week is way simpler than the other. So I tend to still have the usual sleep time in there, right? I still have a lot of these big blocks. So let's just say, you know, you go to sleep at 8 and you wake up at 5. A good 9 hours, that includes getting to sleep and everything, right? So what I do for these big blocks is I usually have the morning, right? So coffee plus morning. I do something simple like that, right? And that's literally it. I don't be super meticulous. I don't say coffee and stretch and then posting videos. I literally just have, I wake up, I have a coffee, and I have a morning little routine, right? And this maybe takes half hour before I get going. And then it's as simple as this. So I tend to break it down into 3 to maybe 5 blocks in a day. I found 3 works really well. 3 lots of like 4 hours worked really well, and that's just a 12-hour shift, right? And you break it down in these blocks of essentially how long, which, you know, might be between 3 to 5 hours, of how long you feel confident working without fatiguing too much, or when you start to fatigue is roughly when it ends, right? And so let's just say I tend to be able to work for 4 hours till I start to fatigue, sometimes 5, depending what it is. But let's just say I can work 4 hours. So I break this down into literally 4 blocks, right? So you'd have deep work 1, and right, and this is literally how I structure it. So I have deep work, right? And say I have I'll take a little break, right? 15 minutes to half hour. I might go get a quick pump, right? Because I literally work in the gym. Behind this padding here is literally some gym equipment. So I literally might get a quick pump, and then I'll have a second deep work session, right? And so what I like to do is, because I break it into 3, I like to try and have at least 2 deep work sessions out of the 3, right? And sometimes I break it into 4, just depending how your day's structured, right? But I like to try to have at least half of those sessions is deep work. And when I say deep work, that means literally everything's off and no one can contact you. And this is your deepest, most important work. This is when you have something you can really chew down into. And if it was, for example, for organic dropshipping, it might be filming a product. It might be analyzing a product, or maybe just digging in and building a really good store for a product. Whatever it might be, that's what a deep work session is for. And it should be something you kind of already know you need to do the day before, right? I tend to not worry too much about when I plan it, because each day looks almost identical, which is deep work session, break, deep work session, lunch. And then I just say lunch goes for half hour, right? You have a quick lunch. And then after that, I might just do a quick, I don't do so much deep work. I literally just do work. This is when you might have your notifications on, you know, and you are talking to people while doing it. You might be on, you know, have some meetings in here. This is a lot more destructured and would look a lot more like one of these sections if you were to plan it out directly, right? Where you've got all these small little things, and this is just where you get your work done, and then you have your dinner plus gym, you know, or a bit more slacking off. I find that doing this session means you can have a little, because you've got 2 deep work sessions, you can tend to have a little bit more time off in the afternoon if you want. But, you know, I tend to fill mine with dinner and gym and try to make it as productive as possible. But these are the 2 most important ones. And these are where some really, really important work gets done. And this is where you really move the needle. And it's not as possible in this because you're really structuring everything out, constantly looking to make sure you're on time. But when you're starting out, you just need to get the work done here. This is when you start to really push. And this is why I find it's a bit more advanced, because you know what you need to do and you're already doing it. And you just need that time to set a block aside and work on it. Now, the one thing I recommend with this and what I've done is sometimes you'll have something like, for example, if I'm planning out, I batch out my long form videos for this brand, right? Let's say it takes way longer. I don't tend to set a timer or make sure I stick to this. This is just generally how long I work for, right? I find it's very fluid. Say though, I get into a really deep work state, I might extend that for 5 to 6 hours or however long I'm working for, and just shorten my next deep work or work session, right? Because the whole idea is that you just work till you start to feel fatigued and you're losing efficiency, and it's better if you go take a break and then come back. And so these are essentially the 2 structures that I recommend if you're getting started. This is the one I recommend if you're just starting out. And if you're a bit more advanced and you've been doing it for a few months or a year or whatever it might be, I recommend transitioning to this one. This is the simplest, no BS kind of structure. You just sit down, you've got no other option but to work. This one is to really understand where you're losing time and to really make sure you understand how to start working harder. Now that's pretty much it for the 2 calendar structures. And as I said, I would actually give you the settings I use to make mine look a little bit better. Because if we go to the day, you can see that these early ones are set out a bit more, right? And we can have the back ones actually darken out. As you can see here, I've already got it, right? See how this darkens out and this is light. I'll show you how I go through my settings. So simply, I like to have mine start on Monday and end on Sunday. I like to have my tasks open because over here you can add a task, which is something that you get to when you've got a little bit of spare time. Say in this section here, you got a bit of spare time, you can fill it with, I don't know, fill out some form, right? You have to fill out or whatever it might be. These are tasks that have no real deadline, but you've got to get to or whatever. And then as you fill them, you can literally tick them off. So I like to have my tasks open, and to do that, you literally just click this task button, right? And then you can add tasks. Now, the important things is I like to have mine in dark mode. If you want to know, you just click appearance. You can change it to dark, light, and or whatever your system default is. Now, this is where I go. So I make sure I have it in week, right? And then you go to settings. Now, this is where I like to go through it. So as you can see on this one, I have another German time here because I've had a few German meetings and stuff. And as you can see, I've got the German time here. Now, this is what you do here, right? You can select a time zone based on what you want, and you just click display secondary time zone. We won't for this one, right? And you have some other small things. Literally, you can go through this and customize as you want, but you don't need any of this. I wouldn't recommend any of that. Keep going. Here you go. Reduce brightness of past events, right? This is just under view options here of some of these basic things over here. So you go to view options, reduce brightness of past events. That's what will give you this so that it goes dull once that event's over. I definitely recommend it. Just makes it easier to track where you're up to in the day. And then I like to, this is the other important one, start week on a Monday. I don't like them starting on a Sunday or a Saturday because realistically a work week starts on a Monday, right? And this just makes it easiest. I like that the most. And really, that's pretty much it, right? And you can find out a lot of keyboard shortcuts. As I've told you, the one I like the most is this control drag, because you're often doing like identical things each day and you can just control drag them over and you don't have to retype them out. Another thing, yes, is the colors. I also, because I've got my calendar open all day, I like to get rid of notifications, and that way I can have on my phone, I'm not constantly getting updated what's next because I've got the calendar open permanently. Other than that, that's pretty much all the tips and tricks and how I plan my calendar and how I've been able to work, 10 to 14 hour days most days, and it feel pretty effortless because I know what I'm doing and I've got a nice calendar structure that keeps me aligned and accountable. So if you found any value from this and if you apply any of it, I'd greatly appreciate a subscribe because I'm aiming to provide as much value as I can to this channel. And if you want more value and other tips and tricks on anything, just send a comment and I'll try my best to make a video based on that. And until then, go get that money.